Bonjour à tous, bienvenue au 104 et ici au salon Propel by MIPIM. Donc moi je suis Marie-Alia Bessouget, je suis directrice de l'innovation du 104 Paris et je vous présente.
Donc moi c'est Cormac Crossan, je travaille chez Schneider électrique et je suis en charge du business développement sur le vertical real estate. Voilà, je suis très content d'être là avec vous.
Ouais. Ah, ça fait du bien de parler, d'être sur la scène.
C'est mon premier événement depuis le déconfinement, donc voilà, je suis vraiment ravi d'être là. En plus dans ce lieu très intéressant. Donc peut-être avant d'attaquer le sujet workplace, on peut parler un peu de ça. Oui. Maria, tu veux présenter les lieux?
Oui, je ne sais pas si vous connaissez le 104. Nous, on est un lieu infini d'art, de culture et d'innovation. On existe depuis plus d'une dizaine d'années. Notre vocation, c'est d'être un lieu ouvert à tous nos publics. Vous le verrez peut-être dans la journée, mais ici se pratique l'art sous toutes ses formes. D'abord dans nos espaces. Alors aujourd'hui, il y a beaucoup d'espaces qui sont dédiés au salon, mais vous allez voir peut-être des gens qui vont répéter, qui vont jouer, qui vont chanter, qui vont faire de la musique. Cormac, tu me disais que c'était une de tes passions. La musique, la culture, c'est essentiel, et notamment quand on pense à travailler, mais il y a des personnes qui travaillent, donc non seulement des artistes, puisque chaque année on accueille à peu près 300 compagnies artistiques par an qui répètent, qui travaillent leur spectacle, et en fonction de l'état d'avancement de leur spectacle, ils vont écrire, ils vont répéter, enfin à différentes phases. Mais on a aussi donc nos collaborateurs, on est 90 aujourd'hui à travailler au 104, mais aussi des entrepreneurs, puisqu'on a un incubateur, 104 Factory, qui est dédié aux industries culturelles et créatives. Et ce sont plus de 90 personnes qui travaillent aussi dans nos locaux, dans un lieu de travail atypique, puisqu'on est dans cet espace du 104. On a plein d'activités. Depuis la toute petite enfance, on a une maison des petits qui accueille les enfants dès le plus jeune âge, quelques jours, quelques mois, quelques semaines, jusqu'à 5 ans. On a pas mal d'activités aussi pour les enfants et beaucoup d'activités qui sont tournées autour du tissu associatif des écoles. Donc on est vraiment un lieu hybride où il se passe plein de choses. Je vous en parlerai pendant notre échange.
Certainement. Donc juste pour vous expliquer un peu comment va fonctionner la session, le but du jeu c'est que ce soit interactif. Marie-Alia, tu avais parlé de musique. Il faut imaginer que la session c'est un jam. Voilà. Donc chacun apporte une idée et on va riffer là-dessus. Donc malheureusement on ne peut pas faire passer le micro pour des raisons qui sont évidentes, sanitaires. En revanche, vous allez voir en haut là, vous voyez c'est marqué interagir avec les speakers. Voilà. Donc vous pouvez nous poser des questions et ça va arriver sur la tablette ici et on peut répondre à vos questions. Donc, en attendant, moi, j'allais juste aborder le sujet du jour. Donc, Reimagining, les espaces de travail, le futur de l'avenir, l'avenir de
the future of work after COVID.
Moi, j'ai la chance dans mon métier de
In my job, I'm quite lucky because I talk to many people from many countries, property developers, heads of property management, professional people in general in property. And one of the subjects that seemed interesting to talk about with Mariella before coming here on stage was the question of connection. And with Mariella, we thought, well, during this period of COVID, we've never been more connected and more disconnected. So it's interesting. Mariella, would you like to talk about this a little bit? Okay, so I don't know how you saw and perceived lockdown and removal of lockdown. I think 50% of people are still working remotely for major groups. We're working from home as well, but also on site. Everything happens on site. And this connection is quite dual, really. We're very close and very far. Many things happen in the workspace that to do with informal communication or opportunity. And with the startups, there are a lot of opportunities happening because people meet up, exchange views and develop projects. We're lucky to have people from France, from abroad in these, and that's how we develop opportunities. And being far physically and being present and connecting through means and technology, a wonderful tool that means that we can do more things. We realize that connection is essential. I'm going to come to work in a workplace. It might be somewhere where I work every day, or a third place, or another place, or a waiting place, a destination place, as they call it. But I can also work in the station when I'm waiting for the train or something. So how can I create future workspaces that mean that we can connect and be connected through digital technology and through human beings? And this is an important idea. We need to recreate these links and develop them. At this enquête here, we might live or work near artists and entrepreneurs or business people that people necessarily meet. So we have this obligation and a requirement to work on these links. And this is down to the teams on the site. They link people up, and there's also the talent of the people. The teams can welcome this type of event, for example. And last week, on the stage last week here, there was a disaster. Well, there was Catastrophe, a group, and they played a musical a musical, and that was possible even after COVID. And so this communication and link is essential, and it's something that leads us to links and work, unless you're completely closed on yourself, but it links you to others. And I think that this is a value, and it's necessary for future workplaces of work. We need to think of these links and connections through technology, and we need to look at how we are going to activate it and get people to meet up and carry on talking. I agree. Now I'm going to talk about the business people and what the expectations of various people is. Now a lot of work and research from Harvard, from PCW and so on say the following. Just to give you a few figures, if we look at the latest research, 78% of people are in favor of working from remotely. 44% think that it should be 1 day per week, and 34% think that there should be more than 2 days or more than 1 day of remote working. So I think it's obvious that to everyone that remote working is something that's always going to remain. According to PricewaterhouseCoopers, it's at 54% of financial directors actually think that remote working is now a compulsory choice and will always be part of company policies. So I think that we're dealing with this complete change and overhaul in how we work in the workspace, in working areas. But something that seems pretty obvious to me is that it won't be all, one thing or another. It'll be a choice based on a choice, system of choice. Among the largest big digital rent companies, the GAFAs, if you look at what the managing directors say, Amazon, Google, and so on. For example, on Facebook, just after the pandemic, Mark Zuckerberg said, well, from now on, it'll be remote working for everyone. No one has to come into the office anymore. And it's interesting to see that the managing directors of Google and Microsoft was far more cagey about it. They said, okay, well, or far more, they took a back step on it. They said, yes, productiveness hasn't dropped, but there are other things other than just work. There's also linking up with people, collaborating, working together, coming up with ideas, brainstorming, innovation, and also mobility in your career at work. You make and connect with other people. You make links and connect with other people who are outside your immediate daily group of links. And so these links and connections are very important in building one's career and in developing one's career over time. Now, I like statistics, so I'm going to give you some statistics. I apologize. But during the pandemic, according to the Harvard Business Review, people who work in offices, worked 40% more with our close colleagues. Seems obvious. Lots of Zoom meetings, and so I can tell you that that's absolutely the case. But we collaborated or worked 10% less than with other people than we do normally with other key people, so people around the company, around us in the company. And so we'll need to wait and see what the impact of this loss of connection and collaboration is with our slightly wider networks. So that was to do with linking and connecting. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any questions. The audience obviously don't know this system, this jam system. Once again, if you wish to ask questions, you have it up on the board. You just go onto Slido, and it's hashtag Propel, and you can ask us questions. I think we also wanted to talk about mutations, changes, transformations. There was a way of thinking of workspaces before and one to think after. So, Maria, what do you think? Okay, I'm going to link this to the world of artists, and you'll see why in a minute. Now, previously, we used to think of artist residencies. We used to give them a space, an area for artists, and we thought, well, it's always going to be the same. But actually, when we work as an artist, a business person, a property developer, or we don't always need the same space, depending on where one is in one's work environment. When we're an artist, we need to concentrate, write, think, and do things in this way. In our working habits, we have different needs, depending on what situation we're in at work. When we practice for a show, we'll need more space, we'll need to be isolated, we'll need to be able to make noise, we won't need the same space. So in the 104, in the 104, what we tried to show is that we have lots of potential spaces, and these spaces can be changed and developed, and depending on the teams and the people, we can attribute the space that corresponds the most to their current needs. And this is something that is constantly changing and developing. So you write the show, you practice, you can show it, you can be on stage, such as this one in 104, and you can change all of the organization of the room, and this change in the working environment is necessary. So not having just these fixed areas, but thinking about how it is organized, and this requires us to be agile to design these spaces. They need to be able to evolve these spaces and adapt to the type of work one is doing. We've talked a great deal about open spaces today. We're on the phone a great deal. When we're masked, it's not that easy either, but thinking of dedicated spaces, comfortable spaces to put out calls, phone calls, for example, that's important. We need comfortable spaces to meet, to think. We need what I would call creative spaces. This might be the stance that we're, or a situation where we're not sitting at a desk, but we might be standing up and moving around. And often here people have ideas because they're walking in the area. I see a lot of business people, they have offices, fantastic offices, but sometimes they're in the middle of the 104 watching people playing and practicing, and it's very inspiring to them. So I think that this idea, we were talking about it, this idea of mutation, changing of spaces, not having just one space for one activity and thinking of different possibilities is essential, and thinking also that possibilities now and maybe different or maybe be different in the future. So we're rethinking everything. Okay, so I'm going to come back to this. I apologize, but let me bring this back to one of my passions, technology, of course. I think that in order to underpin and support and make all of these mutations and changes and this flexibility possible, technology is of course going to play a very important and predominant part in it. And within Schneider, we try to think of the technologies within the building sector, for example, that can help make all of this possible in the in the real estate, or in the property world. Now, we do have a few questions that have popped up. I saw a question. I'm just going to grab one. One of the questions. This is the question. Will we need to reduce the office space or reorganize them? Maria, what do you think about this? Do you want to talk about it? Reduce, reorganize. Often it's difficult. We need to think about uses, and what are the different spaces used for, and how. We need to look at the needs of our users. I was part of a group of designers, or am part, and I think this approach is very interesting. Even if you hold an exhibition or a trade show, you're always going to wonder about the pathway and the uses. So the question is, what do we need to do? Do we need to adapt? And the question really is, today, at the moment we stand in this unusual time, what are the needs and requirements of people who work with me and with us? What are their needs and requirements, and how can I ensure that the workplace is a place of attraction? How can I meet their needs? And I would reverse actually this question, and I would say, well, the priority really is to really understand needs and analyze and see how we can transform things, be more in transforming than reducing the workspace. We shouldn't be reducing, but changing, transforming, widening, giving more value based on the needs identified. And I think this is important, something important that we should listen to. I agree. I think it's similar to any sort of real breakthrough moment. We need to ask the questions: what are these buildings for? They're places, they create more productiveness. Now, where we can help, I think, is understanding the different usages. Today, there are technologies out there to better understand how spaces are reused, and I am thinking of the Internet of Things that can tell us what the occupancy level of a space is during a period of time in the day. How is this correlated with the environmental situation or the conditions? Is one of the areas underused? Is it to do with the air filtering system, the CO2 levels, the high temperatures? Or high temperatures that are too high? We can think about this and look at this. And I think that this can really feed into the different potential solutions that we have for this decision-making. And this can be useful to not make mistakes. And to answer the question directly, maybe we will need less space. Maybe we will need more space to respect social distancing so that people have enough space to withstand the different uses and provide for them. And I do believe this. There are technologies out there. They're easy to implement. The ROI is 2 months. So it's something that is self-sufficient within 2 months. Never heard. I work in technology and have done for 16 years. I've never seen this before. And so I think that there's absolutely, certainly an answer. The question is very interesting, and technology can play its role in it. Maria, we're going to welcome our illustrious third participant, Gilles Betterhauser, who had a few issues coming in this morning because of the traffic. Gilles, welcome. Welcome, welcome. And Gilles is going to join our discussion. Gilles, please take a microphone. Good. Thank you very much. Gilles, we have the question, we're talking about the workspace. We've talked about various topics, we'll mention others. We talked about connection, the importance of new technologies to allow for this agility, flexibility of workspaces. The links that that are created within these workspaces as well are important. And we had talked about this question of reversibility, different functions, uses that are possible today and that might be different in the future. We may not have even thought of the different uses of the future yet for these workspaces. So what is your thought on this? As an introduction, what can I say? Well, over the past 6 months, if I just look at the Paris region, 10 million square meters of space are not occupied. And of course, these square meters that are not occupied are economic burdens on companies. And what we've noticed is that the companies still carry on functioning and operating. And the central topic is today, how can we work differently? So this thought about how we can work differently, well, it seems that it can be highlighted with 3 topics that I've chosen to share with you now today. One has to do with the hybrid systems, hybrid places. Hybridization is to do with organizing companies. We've moved from a very integrated organization where space and time are mixed in a linear way, and this has led to the fact that in order to optimize projects to work, get the company to work, we've actually grouped people together on major sites because we've decided that cross-functionality was worked better when we were in a collaborative horizontal system, but all of this stopped with the situation as it is today. Today, space and time in companies is built differently, and so we're moving towards time that is discontinuous and space that is broken up and also composite. All of this has led to the appearance of new tertiary or third-party organizations and de-tertiarization of companies. And this is the follow-on from what's been happening over the past few years. And this removal from the third sector of companies is leading to new development of new spaces at work, co-working, remote working, and so on. This has led to mutations and infrastructures that are linked to changes in companies. Now, where will this form of hybridization actually lead us to, or hybridization lead us to? Well, companies were organized in quite a linear, normal way, not very long ago, but 5 to 10 years from now, they're looking at broken up models where the share of the office may only affect 50 to 60% of the headcount of the employees. So the second idea I wanted to share with you is to do not with the office as such, but the role of the office in its hidden aspects. So what we have noticed over the past few years is a third-party organization that aimed at making these spaces more functional, and that was the proliferation of ideas for uses, for technologies, and use of technologies, interaction of technologies for people who were in the buildings, using the buildings, to thinking about the most adapted forms of tertiary development to her company, agile management, and so on. And so what we do notice today is that this idea of the office is mainly perceived and lived through the term efficiency. We're looking for efficiency everywhere, whether we're talking using the square meterage, the obvious gains from square meterage, and offering colleagues the best options possible in this tertiary sector. So all of this has been overhauled over the past few months, and people have been thinking the following. They've been wondering about remote working, teleworking, apart from how abstract it makes the individual in relation to the workspace. What we've noticed is that teleworking has enabled people to remain connected. It's also enabled people to remain connected, but it's also shown its limitations regarding collaborative work, because we've noted that there's a desynchronizing of people among themselves and people in relation to the company or even in relation to their job. And what we've also noticed is that there's a great deal of isolation. So you work for a company with 10,000 employees. Out of 10,000 employees, 1,000 cases were noted to be feeling isolated, and these are sort of psychosocial risks linked to work. And so the central question here is the link of the individual to the company via the office space, and the role of the office. It's a sacred, so-called sacred dimension and element, and what's happening in the offices today is similar to what happens in rugby changing rooms. It's a sort of sacred environment, and this is moving us towards something that's important, not the how and the why. We've answered those two questions and have done over the past 30 years, but how do we ensure now that offices are more adapted to the world of work? How do we ensure that they are more and more efficient? We haven't responded to the question of what do we do in the office. The office is becoming a place, a destination, a place to go to, and it becomes a place to go to when we see the advent of a topic developing in a company, and it's central to the company, and that's emotional intelligence versus rational intelligence. And of course, this teleworking type of work means that you can develop all sorts of tasks and optimize processes. It means that companies that concentrate on tasks and processes are seeing teleworking developing quite nicely, but all of the companies that are based on collaborative collaborative work that's more informal, on creative aspects, innovation, and at the heart of the operating processes of the company. All of these companies are seeking a third or tertiary organization that will be adapted and where the workspace, an office, is a place to go. What we're trying to do is create emotion. We're trying to create emotion that's mobile, and we need this creation of emotion through these reworked and rethought spaces and offices through design, technology, and design and technology are adapted to do this. And it's something that creates alchemy between the employees and the company. It's through the office. It's the spirit of the place that you work in. So this link between teleworking and rethought work, the redefinition of the office in a far more sort of destination-based dimension, is at the heart of all of the designers and architects and people, investors, property developers, people who design offices for the future, with a far more wider acceptation of this tertiary sector aspect. Now, the third idea is very much linked to the idea that one has of the overlighting or additional light or too much lighting in the offices. The concentration, too much concentrating on offices. So what is the office? And behind this question, what is the office, there's a much more tricky question to provide an answer to, and the answer is not a simple one because it's something that goes beyond us, and that's the development itself of the world of work. What we're trying to do is highlight what's happening in the offices of the future, because we're not able to respond to the essential question, and which is the emergence of a true and profound change that is coming via this technology, artificial intelligence, and through the massive destruction of non-qualified jobs that are going to make obsolete millions of square meters that are occupied today by people whose job is actually going to disappear, and then the advent and the emergence of a whole load of new activities and jobs that are going to require infrastructures, offices, places in which a different life is going to be organized and developed in the way where tribal sort of form of tribal social organization is going to develop that will be different from today's companies. And all of this means that we need to rethink spaces and more widely rethink the social contract that links people to one person to another. And the world of work is going to be seeing a true revolution. And it seems to me that companies are not at all ready to deal with it. So we're trying to get closer to proof. Of course, the old proof or evidence is that, or the evident things are that we need to rethink the office, the uses of the office. We need to organize differently how the company links to the individual and vice versa. And this projects us into what's going to happen over the next 10 years. But if we go further than that, 20, 30 years in the future, other questions pop up. And the question of the office is really enthralling because it's something that is going to be a milestone in the evolution and the revolution of the social organization, and it's going to enable us to position the company or the companies in the heart of an unprecedented social change and mutation. We're invited, all of us, together to live through this revolution. And I think that what we've been living through over the past few months is the emergence of a deep-rooted movement that's going to change us in our daily habits and put to question our daily work and our everyday work. Very interesting, Gilles. I made the most of this to come back to what you last said and get the public to talk as well. They've asked a question on the impact of the future of working spaces in terms of the environment and ecological concerns. Would you like to answer this, Mariella? Or? Well, we were talking about this when we prepared this roundtable discussion. Today we're talking about comfort. Helping this mutation, this change is something I believe in, and that's what Gilles talked about. So today we need to prepare to think of a place for activities that we still yet don't know, but there may be things that might remain, and whatever we do, we'll always go to eat. So the staff restaurant of the future might be different. In the 104, we have entrepreneurs, startups, They have ways of working that are very different from, for example, a cultural institution. But there are rituals or rights. People come, teams come. They like the space. They're comfortable here. So the idea of the environment and sustainable development, well, that's something that people expect. In other words, people need to be in a place that's responsible, where there are strong commitments, where you need to be sure that the building was designed, if it's a new space, designed with as little impact as possible on the environment. And I think that it's the whole building, beyond consuming and using of energy. It's the whole process, whether it's the transport method to access the building, it's part of the environment. And tomorrow, colleague, lady or man, might come to this place and have very strong expectations. As a cultural institution, it's a big work program that we're carrying out. We're not necessarily best placed and informed. We have restrictions linked to a heritage building, There are lots of things we don't know we can't do. We would like to have solar panels. We can't do it. Lots of things we want to do. But little by little, we're transforming our working spaces so that they respond to expectations that are expectations for everyone, whether we're talking about for our employees or our users. So this question of sustainable development is essential, and we need to deal with it. And in these places of the future for teleworking, for working, and we can't think that these places will not be responsible with a positive impact on the environment. It has to have a positive impact. You were talking about psychosocial risks earlier on. Isolation when you're teleworking, the role and responsibility of an organization is to link people, create relationships and develop them, and think also about how within the organization, the work organization, how in an environment that's far more complex. A few months ago, I think it was in January or February, we had a catwalk show today of Marine Serre, a clothes designer. She was doing her catwalk show in the stables, and the models were all wearing masks. And at the time, I thought this catwalk show was violent and quite difficult. But now today, I can see we're talking, and you're all masked. So we need to be aware and care for the well-being of the employees and our colleagues. It's essential. So this issue of sustainable development has an element that is good for the planet, but also good for us and our colleagues, because in the end, if this remains, and I was talking about feeding ourselves, eating, if jobs are going to change and transform, what we really need to develop and carry on developing our talents. And how do we do this? Well, by attracting them to our spaces. We need to provide them with comfortable situations, but we need to also provide them with capabilities to be agile, accompany change. And here we were able recently to offer a whole load of virtual works of art. It's crazy because it was during the pandemic and we were all wearing masks, but we were able to show these works of art. It was the Mostra di Venice festival, and we helped our colleagues and employees, and we welcomed users. They generally come for exhibitions or shows, but we helped them to show and made sure that this experience was as secure and enjoyable as ever for people watching it. So it's important. Sustainable development, developing skills and competencies of people, and well-being. Gilles, would you like to talk about the environmental aspect of sustainable development? Well, Anglo-Saxons have a job. I think you're Anglo-Saxon. Yes, you are. Okay. They have a job that's that they've coined a phrase or a word. Sustainability today is a composite word. We have a company that has 6,000 employees in Vélizy. 6,000 employees come in every day. 5,800 come by car every day. The carbon footprint of the company every year is disastrous. We're currently thinking of moving the company because of this, and thinking of these 5,500 car parking spaces that are there at the moment to be changed in the future on the future site into 500 car parking spaces, and then the rest will be a whole lot of other things. And this requires new infrastructures, transport, not only though just for bicycles. So we're talking with administrative services of the site we're looking at that will enable us to remove these 5,500 car parking places and get people to come in a different, not by car. So the second interesting idea is dedicated to the observation that we make or have been making over the past 6 months with the removal of useless meetings. That's what we call deparasiting. A lot of companies work in a type of organization that's physical, systematic meetings. We help with a company, 4,000 employees. People spend on average 77% of their time, whatever they do, in meetings that are physical meetings. And so we're able to remove the parasites within or clean up the way these companies work. This is a management effort. We're going to save a great deal of time. This time is very useful for the planet because it's time where we're getting people to use a lot of energy in order to bring people in from Amsterdam, Dublin or Buenos Aires for meetings that are generally pretty useful. So removing these useless meetings is essential. And there's a management, we need to carry out this management change so we can make people responsible and run all of this and get them working in a community that's different from when they meet or they used to meet physically. So the interaction between meetings in presence and meetings that are remote with the use of different technology is a key element, but the real challenge here is a revolution of the management processes within the companies. Then there are things that are far more complex. If we want people to get to work together, we need to do this in tertiary infrastructures or buildings. So we thought of a whole load of changes in technology for construction, in the materials used, in technologies involved to enable these buildings to consume less energy, even produce energy. In fact, we're helping the building of the new energy building in La Garenne-Colombe. It's an interesting project because they're using interesting technologies, and there'll be ways of operating at the headquarters that will be very self-sufficient and environmental, and colleagues will be very, very proud of the system and the building. But when you get people to work together on the site, when you get 5,000 or 10,000 people and they use the internet in an exponential way every day, the internet is probably the worst thing that could have happened to the planet from an environmental point of view, because when you look at major and massive developments of data centers and all of the cooling units that are required in order to process data, well, you end up with consumer or consumption levels of energy that are astoundingly scary for the future, and we absolutely don't need to know how to deal with this issue. The internet is not the ultimate solution to all of our problems. And in fact, the topic really here is to end up being able to sit down all together, with all of the economic players in a rational and look at things rationally and look at things responsibly and try and look at the future and protect and forecast and design things differently from the way things are done now. So very thinking that bicycles and the internet are the ultimate solutions to sort out our environmental problems, well, that's not necessarily the case. I don't think I know what's going to happen, but what I am certain is that new sources of energy are going to be or are available. We're working on hydrogen being used on different sites now, which will reduce the use of fossil fuels in a dramatic way. We're moving towards new types of mobility. Artificial intelligence does not have just inconveniences or is not just negative. It will enable us to reduce significantly people moving around. Maybe in the future we'll be living in a world which is almost virtual, where meetings will mainly be remote and virtual. And so maybe new generations will also impose less development on the world, maybe with individual carbon footprints that will mean that it's far more effective than what we have today. These are different questions that are being thought about. There's not one line today from headquarters that doesn't actually take into account these different aspects. And this aspect, everyone knows that it's a way of attracting new talents. Everyone knows also that it's an essential element to help the planet be sustainable, and we must answer these questions.
dire un mot sur la
Okay,
partie
just a word
développement.
about
Je pense que c'est
sustainable
je
development.
rejoins ce que vous avez dit.
I totally agree with what you just
Si
said.
j'écoute Larry Fink, le PDG de
If I listen to
BlackRock,
Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock during the pandemic,
présentait la meilleure
the
performance
assets
financière,
which
c'était son
performed
portefeuille
best
green.
were his green portfolio.
On parlait de
And
réalité
so
économique.
we're talking about the economic reality over
Je
here.
pense qu'il y a un
I
ensemble
do
de
believe
choses
that
qui font
there's a
que
set of
développement
things
durable, ça va être
that are
clé.
such that sustainable development will be
J'ai entendu une
essential.
citation, quelqu'un qui disait que
I heard somebody
la
say
pandémie
that
actuelle, c'est ni
the
plus ni moins
current
qu'une
pandemic
réflexion
is
générale
just
pour le
final
changement climatique.
rehearsal
C'est aussi
for
des
climate
challenges
change, and
importants que
that will come with other
affronter
important
l'humanité.
challenges that
Donc, je
we
pense que
all
ça va
need
être
to
un des
face.
éléments clés dans
So
l'immobilier
it's
de demain.
one of the
Bien
key
sûr,
elements for
le
real
développement
estate in
durable,
the
c'est
future.
créateur de valeur.
And
sait tous que
sustainable
des
development
bâtiments qui
will
sont
create
certifiés
value.
LEED
We
ou
know
certifiés
that
BREEAM
all those who
valent
have a
plus
LEED or
que les
BREEAM
actifs
certification are worth more than
Au-delà de ça,
non-certified
si je devais juste rajouter
assets.
quelques éléments, c'est que je pense que les bâtiments
I
de
also
demain
believe that
et les espaces de travail
the
demain
buildings
vont
of
devoir
the future for
être
living
à la
and
fois plus
working
résilients,
will have to be more resilient.
plus efficaces, donc plus
They will have to be
efficients,
more efficient also,
devoir faire plus avec les mêmes,
and will have
avec les
to
mêmes
do
je vais
more
dire
with
ingrédients, faute de
less.
meilleur mot en français, excusez-moi, en français approximatif. Et je pense que les
And
bâtiments,
I believe that
on va devoir vraiment réellement
buildings,
mettre les personnes
as
au
regards
centre
buildings,
de
we will
la
have to
conception
put
de ces espaces.
humans at
Chose
the
qu'on n'a
center
pas,
of
je
the
pense,
design of
qu'on a
these
réussi à faire.
buildings. This is
Jusque-là.
something that
Donc,
we
la
haven't
stratégie de Schneider,
been doing so
de
far.
mon entreprise,
Schneider's strategy, at least my
dès
company's
maintenant,
strategy
c'est
from
comment
now
est-ce
on
qu'on
is
rend les
how
bâtiments
can
plus
we
performants
make
sur ces aspects-là.
buildings perform better in this
Encore des
respect.
questions. On va essayer
There
de
are still
répondre
many
peut-être à une dernière
questions,
question
and we'll
et
try and
puis,
answer to this
on va laisser parler un petit peu.
to a last
Juste
question.
une question un peu
Yes, a
provocatrice.
question
Va-t-on
for
encore
that is,
construire des tours
will we
où il y
still be
aura 10 000
building
personnes
towers
post-Covid?
with 10,000 people
Des tours de 10 000
post-COVID, you know, towers
Oui, non.
housing 10,000
En
people?
tant que grande
Yes or
spécialiste de
no?
la construction de tours
Well,
de 10 000
as a
personnes,
big specialist of tower building for 10,000 people, I just don't have a clue
comment on va
about
construire
how
des tours.
we'll be building towers in the future.
Donc je passe.
So, frankly,
Je
I
ne réponds
pass.
pas, j'en sais rien.
I can't
Non,
answer. I don't
j'aimerais
have a
qu'on
clue.
réfléchisse à
But
comment
maybe
est-ce que
we
ces
could
tours
think
qui
about
existent,
how these
peut-être que on
current
disait
towers, the
que
towers that have been
ces tours
built
ne sont
already,
pas occupés justement
these
par,
towers
par
are
le-
not
par le travail. Et
used
comment est-ce qu'on
by
peut
work.
imaginer que dans
How
ces
could we
surfaces
imagine that
qui
in
sont
these
pas occupées, à côté de ça, on a des
empty
acteurs aussi
surfaces,
qui font
because
partie de
next to
nos
them we have
écosystèmes,
players
des
close
acteurs,
to
par
our
exemple, de l'économie
ecosystems,
sociale et
people
solidaire,
from
des acteurs de la culture, qui ont besoin
culture
de lieux
or
aussi, de lieux de
solidarity.
répétition,
They
de lieux-
need
comment est-ce qu'on
places
va
where they
pouvoir
can get
essayer
together.
d'imaginer
How
que
can
dans
we
ces bâtiments
imagine
qui
that
ont
in
plutôt
these
vocation
buildings
économique et commerciale,
that are
on pourrait
more
intégrer
designed
davantage
for
d'autres
business,
usages
how can we
et permettre à
imagine
ces acteurs-là
different to use them differently?
d'intervenir. Donc,
And
moi, ce que
what I
j'imaginerais, c'est que c'est dans
would
ces tours
imagine
peut-être où qui
is
sont sous-utilisés,
that
comment
in these
réfléchir
underused
à
towers,
donner accès à
maybe
d'autres
we
acteurs. Je crois qu'il
could
y a eu dans le monde récemment une
let
pétition
other
d'acteurs
players
justement
access
qui
them.
souhaitaient avoir
There was
un peu
this
plus
petition
d'accès à ce
which
parc immobilier,
required a more
vaste,
access to this
parce que je
very
pense que des
broad
idées, des projets, il y en a beaucoup.
real
Maintenant
estate
qu'on a des espaces, les possibles sont nombreux.
source because there's so much space available.
Tour de 10 000 personnes.
Gilles, towers of 10,000 people. Well, I believe that the tower comes with an outdated image, which is the assertion of a strong identity. The tower is the assertion of the leadership of a company, of its brand, of its power, and companies, very integrated companies, who came out with this image of power through the side of towers, like to, occupy huge big towers. So there's the symbolic aspect of the tower. I think this is game over. But then there is the functional tower, and here, when you oppose the vertical tower to the horizontal campus, I mean, you don't need to think very long to understand that the land footprint is not the same. So do we want people to work in the same place? I mean, in major cities, I believe there is not many more solutions, I mean, than just building a tower when there are other people in one place, because it's the most adapted real estate object. So yes, for the sake of pragmatism, in order to be efficient, yes, there will be towers built. Just look at all the projects that we can see and that will be carried out. I mean, I suggest you look at what's going to happen in La Défense with the development of the headquarters of Total, with the sister towers of Unibail. Maybe there'll be a new way of thinking towers. I mean, towers are also a revolution. I mean, for those who visited the latest towers, you can enjoy high, quality of life in these towers. And in any case, a tower, in certain cases, it enables to meet, answer to this issue of being central, because everyone's dreaming of the, English or American campuses. For those who visit the Silicon Valley, they are wonderful, things, but they are very far from, downtown. And these towers, in certain cases, are an adapted answer to ecological questions, because to relocate 30 kilometers away from the urban center without any other transport solution than a car, well, it shows. If you take Challenger, Bouygues, campus does not have a good ecological footprint. If you compare it with the tower in La Défense, so this was the question that was already put 10 years ago. Many people promised that towers would disappear. We have never been building as many towers in the world as today. Different towers, certainly, that meet different types of organizations, but as long as we haven't answered to the way work is organized, we'll carry on working towers in major European and global cities. Well, thank you very much to the two of you. I'd like to thank the audience. I think we are over time now, so we will let you break, well, not for lunch, at least not straight away, but thank you very much for this extremely interesting conversation. I hope you appreciated this jam on real estate, and so I suggest, well, yes, please come and visit if you have questions. And have a lovely day.
Merci.
Thank you very much.